my name is Ariana Duffy and I'm a conservation technician here at San Antonio Zoo. Welcome everybody. Today we are actually very excited to welcome a new horned lizard. While we're waiting for his arrival, we are going to show to you some of the things we do here. And one of the most important things is quarantining them. So basically anytime a new animal comes in, we don't want to just put him with all the other animals we have, just in case he does have some infection or some issue, we wouldn't want it to spread to our current collection. So what we do is isolate them. So for about 30 days, we will keep them separate from all the other lizards. And right now we have 3 of them currently in quarantine. And so part of the quarantine process is, in addition to isolating them for 30 days, is ensuring that they have 3 negative consecutive fecals, which basically means we want to make sure they don't have any parasites or any other issues going on like that. And we'll also do a quarantine exam, and depending on the animals, sometimes a blood draw or x-rays, just depending on if there's any underlying issues. So today we're going to start with one of our newest lizards. The first one I'm going to grab is a female who we actually think might be gravid, which basically means she might be pregnant and have eggs because she's actually really, really big in weight. And the only good way to really determine if they are pregnant would be doing x-rays or an ultrasound, just because it is hard to tell just visually looking at them.
So what I'm doing now is just taking a look as if anybody were to go to the doctor. We take a look at the eyes, we look at the ears. Believe it or not, they still have ear coverings, even though you don't see them outside. We look inside the mouth. This one's not cooperating, so we'll do that in a second. We look at all the toes, the arms, the skin, make sure everything is healthy, make sure there's no cuts or bruises or any type of problems with their spine, bones. So everything looks pretty good. Yeah, take a look over here, make sure the tail's okay and everything. Then we're going to go ahead and try to see if we can feel for some eggs. They can be a little difficult if she's early in her pregnancy, if you will. So I don't feel anything specific as yet. So right now she's just getting basically a little belly massage. But there could be something there. It could be very early. So as time goes on and we start seeing that she's getting bigger, we'll take an x-ray and see if we have some calcified eggs in there. Yeah, she's going to sleep because she's got a belly rub.
Yeah, and one of the reasons we suspected her being pregnant, other than looking very large, is her weight is about 86 grams. And a lot of our other lizards, their weights range from anywhere between 20 to 40 grams. So that's a huge weight size for one of our horned lizards.
Now, is breeding them something that this zoo has been successful at before?
Yes, we have been. Actually, last season we had a successful clutch of eggs that were hatched, and we currently have about 25 babies from that clutch.
Do you ever release those babies out into the environment?
The goal ultimately is to release the babies in the wild, the idea being to reestablish individuals and populations where they used to be much more widespread but since have declined. Unfortunately, we wouldn't want to release just 25 individuals that are all related to each other, because that would not be sustainable genetically to ensure a good variety and enough individuals for reproducing. So we did not release those, but we are hoping this season we'll have many more successful clutches and be able to release a lot more. So actually, first I just want to show you the difference between female and male. I always think it's pretty interesting. So she is a girl, and one of the ways you can tell is she's much smoother right here. Normally that's where she would have her testicles if she was a male, and also has less pores on the legs here. So now I'll grab a male and you should be able to see the difference better. And since we are quarantining them from each other as well, I'm gonna make sure I change my gloves between each one that I handle. Let's see. Oh, these are all girls. I'll be right back.
So, Dr. Rob, can you explain the value of quarantine and what that means in the animal world that might differ from people?
Well, what we want to make sure is that, we have animals in our population within our conservation collection that's isolated. We want to keep them disease-free because we want to increase those numbers and have some offspring that we can release back in the wild. So we want to make sure that we're not bringing anything into the wild, as well as if there's anything from a population in the wild, we don't want to bring them here. So that's what the quarantine's for. So they're separate. They're maintained the exact same way. They're fed, given some water, heat, all the things that they need to thrive. Then after they've had maybe some stool checks, exam, and everything is clear, then they can go back in with the regular population. But we want to keep them separate just to make sure they don't have anything, and we don't want to give them anything as well. So want to make sure everybody's happy and healthy.
And this
Awesome.
is one of our males here. So you can see he's much more swollen there. That's where the hemipenes are. And also you can see the femoral pores here are much more pronounced. So it probably would have been better if I showed you the male first than the female. But that's the best way to determine the difference between the two.
Do you go through a quarantine process with all of the animals here at the zoo, or is it just reptiles? And do they vary with the needs of each species?
Actually, we quarantine all the different animals that come into the zoo, be it a mammal, a bird, or a reptile, amphibian, or fish. We want to make sure that, like I said, same exact thing with making sure that they're healthy before they come into the zoo. We do make some changes depending on the species. Obviously, fish are aquatic, so you can sometimes have multiple species of fish within one tank. And with birds, we can keep a couple of them together. Some animals like to be by themselves, such as these horned lizards are by themselves. Sometimes we keep a bird maybe by itself, or maybe we'll have them side by side, depending on the species. And we keep them for about 30 days. Some species like reptiles maybe will go a little longer, right, 60 days, depending on what disease we may suspect, which typically we don't see a whole lot, but we just make sure. That's our job, is just to be diligent and make sure that we have no issues going on.
So you said that you were doing quarantine exams on these guys because you were getting ready to introduce a new animal into this grouping. Cassandra would like to know where these came from prior to being at the zoo.
Well, the ones that we have, we are working with the southern genetic variety, so basically ones that are south of the Colorado and then all the way east out to Del Rio.
Awesome. All right, it seems like our newbie is ready to join us, so we're going to come over here and see what's going on. Hi.
Hi.
Who are you?
My name is Leslie Gossman. I'm the president of the Horned Lizard Conservation Society. And I'm bringing the lizard to the San Antonio Zoo today.
Awesome.
Great. What you got for us? Dr. Rob, want to take a look?
Yeah, we'll take a look. A little bitty guy here.
So who is this guy, Leslie, and where did he come from?
So the HLCS works to conserve and protect horned lizards, and sometimes we'll get somebody call us or message us or email us and let us know that they have picked up a horned lizard out in the wild and they don't know what to do with it. So 2 days ago we got a message through our Facebook that somebody had a horned lizard that they wanted us to put into a safe place. Another family had picked it up from West Texas, brought it home as a pet, realized that they couldn't take care of it as a pet because they are very difficult to keep. And they also found out that they're illegal to pick up. So they had this other family contact us and wanted us to find it a new home, since they could not take it back to where they got it. Because we typically ask people to take them back to where they get them. That's the best solution. So they could not do that. So yesterday I met with the family who had been given the horned lizard from the family who took it, and we transferred it to us, to HLCS, and then today I drove up to the San Antonio Zoo and I am dropping it off for you guys.
And I can go ahead and get a weight on him, actually.
Yeah, if you want to walk us through the process of what you would do to bring a new animal into your group.
So first, we always get an incoming weight, because one of the most important ways to monitor their health is to keep track of their weight. So a lot of times when animals come into quarantine, they're much more stressed out. They're in a new environment. Everything is different. The food, they're not used to it. And so it's important to make sure that they're eating. And so we'll take weight checks every so often just to make sure they're still thriving. So he is 10.96 grams. And we already have a little house set up for him here. So we like to give them this haba hut so they can hide underneath it, but also, if you notice, it is right below the heat lamp. So if they want to get at the hottest point of the terrarium, by standing on top of the hut, they can get to a higher temperature. And then if they want to be in a cooler temperature, they can come forwards to the front of it. And we have a little water dish for him. So right now, I know you see that he's on paper towels. The reason being, since he is being quarantined and we do want to collect fecals on them, it is harder to collect the fecals in the sand because usually they get buried, and then it's harder to process them because there's all the sand particles. So while they're in quarantine, and only for that time, is when we'll have them on paper towels. And once they're released, we'll move them to sand. The female from before is on sand because we suspect she's pregnant. And when they lay eggs, they would lay them in the sand, so we want to make sure she has that option. But speaking of fecals,
There was one in the transport carrier.
yeah, so I can
Woo, poop!
go ahead and process one of those.
Just what everybody comes onto Facebook Live to see at the zoo is poop. Deanna would like to know how long quarantine lasts.
So usually it's 30 days, but a lot of times for reptiles that will be extended from anywhere between 30 to 90 days. And since, as I mentioned before, we need to get 3 negative consecutive fecals, so a lot of times we'll get a fecal that's negative and then the second one is positive, the animal would need treatment, so we would have to start all over again. So really it depends on the individual and their health, or a lot of times if they or maybe seem like they are not doing as well, we'll keep them a bit of extra time. Usually the horned lizards that we have, in my experience so far, they've had all clear fecals, but I'm referring to like even other animals that usually sometimes end up coming up with things.
So what do you all feed the horned lizards while they're here?
So normally in the wild they would eat harvester ants. We feed them harvester ants here, but we also supplement it with other things such as crickets, mealworms, waxworms, even roaches, fruit flies. So we give them a very good variety.
What is their lifespan?
So it's in the wild, I believe it is between 3 to 5 years, but in captivity that's usually much longer. And they can, I know we had one that was about 8 years old at one point.
Excellent. Are you going to process a fecal?
Yes.
And then while you're working on that, Leslie, would you mind stepping back over and giving us a little more information on what your company does? You can even give it a shout out, say the full name. That way people can go follow you on Facebook and follow all your success stories.
Okay, I'm the president of the Horned Lizard Conservation Society. And our mission is to document the values of the horned lizard and to protect it. We cover its total range in North America, from southern Canada all the way in western U.S., from Nebraska over to the Pacific coast, all the way down to southern Mexico, the southernmost part of Mexico. That's a big area. There are currently 17 species of horned lizards. The Texas horned lizard is one of those species. So we cover all the different species across that whole range. It's a lot to do. It's a lot of effort, and our whole staff is volunteers. We have no paid staff at all to do all this work, and we're all very excited to work with the horned lizards. We all feel like it's our favorite reptile.
Awesome. Can you explain the relationship with San Antonio Zoo and why it was decided, or how it was decided, to bring this young male into the zoo?
Yeah, good question. So when we got the phone call 2 nights ago, I asked them where they got it, and I know that the Texas horned lizard in Texas has 3 different clades, and one that they had told me, the area that they told me it came from, is in the southern clade, which the San Antonio Zoo covers. The northern clade works with the Fort Worth Zoo, and the Dallas Zoo works with the northern clade, and the San Antonio Zoo works with the southern clade. So I contacted Andy Glusenkamp, who works here at the San Antonio Zoo, and asked him if he would like to have another horned lizard. And he jumped on it and said yes, they would love to have it for their breeding program. They would like to have a little bit more diversity in their genetics, and this would help with that. So from there on, I packaged him up and brought him here.
Awesome. Can you tell all of our viewers what would be some of the most important things that they could do to help horned lizard conservation, even from home? And what should they do if they find a horned lizard out maybe near their house?
All right, we'll start with if they find one at their house, just to leave it where you find it. That's basically what we tell people. Just leave it where you find it. That horned lizard then can make future generations, and future human generations can then enjoy that horned lizard. Things that people can do, one is they could join a Horned Lizard Conservation Society. Their membership and any donations go straight to the horned lizard. Like I said, we have no paid staff, and all that money goes to support horned lizard conservation. And one of the big things that we fund are our grant program. This year we gave 4 grants for horned lizard conservation, and last year we gave 6 grants. So if you're interested in doing horned lizard research, or even working with educational materials, you can check our website, hornedlizards.org, and we have a grant page, and you can go there and check that out. Other things that you can do is you can contact state and federal legislative or even local officials on trying to preserve natural areas where horned lizards live and thrive. That would be another good thing that they could do.
Awesome.
Oh, and also if you've got ant mounds, a lot of people they feel like these ants, the harvester ants, are an annoyance, so they try and exterminate these ant mounds. If you've got horned lizards nearby, try to keep those ant mounds as healthy as you can.
Is there any way to guesstimate an age when you find lizards? So like this guy, just to give people a reference, he was only 10 grams, whereas the female that we saw was 87 grams. So 8 times bigger than this guy. Does their size and age directly correlate at all?
Yes, this one that you're filming right now is the one that I brought in, and he is about a year old. So he will continue to grow. But don't the females are larger than the males?
Well, it's actually kind of all over the place. We've had females that are between 40 to 60 grams, and then males that are 18 and 19 grams that are trying to court them, and vice versa. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we found, like, as far as weight and sex, we haven't seen like a correlation of males
I hadn't
being bigger
either.
than
I was just curious what you guys thought. Yeah.
It's interesting that we've seen like really tiny males trying to breed with these massive females, and they're kind of holding on like you would if you're riding a bull, it almost looks like. And
Awesome. So how are you doing on this fecal?
Yeah,
Can you
so-
walk us through the process?
So right now I'm doing a fecal float. Basically, if there are any parasitic ova, they, depending on the specific gravity, they will rise to the top of that and attach to the slide. So right now I'm letting it sit for 10 to 15 minutes, and the idea is if the parasitic ova have a specific gravity less than what the liquid is, they'll float to the top. So that fecal solution is sodium nitrate, which has a 1.2 specific gravity. So it's a good way to look at for parasites. Unfortunately, it does depend on the type of parasite and the specific gravity. So a lot of times it's better to use a centrifuge because that's more accurate than a float. But in my experience from doing fecals from these guys, I have not often seen any nematodes, which would probably be the most common parasite for the horned lizard.
So once these 4 lizards are successfully out of quarantine, what do you do with them after that? What happens next?
Well, we'll move them over into what we call our lizard factory, where we'll be pairing them up with partners, so to start breeding them.
And how do you choose partners?
It's mostly based on the area they're from, so genetically we want to keep a good variation. So if, say, 2 of them were caught from the same area, we maybe would pair them up with one that was caught further away, just to ensure that we have a genetic variety. But it's mostly ones that we've had born in captivity. We wouldn't want to breed, say, all of those with the same male, so we would keep track and make sure that it's specific ones.
How many do you have here at the zoo?
Right now we have about 70 horned lizards.
All right, so would you mind actually showing us, so once these guys successfully come out of quarantine, where they would be moved to?
So they would be moved into this room over here. So you can follow me. And this is our horned lizard room.
Does every aquarium have a horned lizard in them?
Yes. Well, yes, except for 1 or 2 of them.
Have you seen a lot of success with breeding this species here at the zoo?
Yes, and actually we can go ahead and pair them up now so you can see.
Ooh, it's like actually meeting for the first date.
Yeah. And usually the most action happens when they're first put together. So we might get lucky and or no.
Or they might get lucky.
Right. Depends how you look at it.
So what would you look for that would be positive signs of interest? What kind of behavior?
Well, I mean, ideally you would see them actually copulating, and you could, like, if he mounts her, and you can tell if he's successfully,
Successful.
yeah, if he's successful.
So we have a lot of like first meetings happening right now,
Yes.
which can be really exciting or really boring, correct?
Right. And you could spend hours standing watching and you might not see anything, or like in this case, you might get some sparks flying from the get-go.
We are not keeping it PG today.
So the head bobbing is something they'll do. They'll kind of waggle their tails a little bit. Sometimes they'll even lick the sand. We've noticed that they'll do that a lot. There's a theory that it could be hormones, or just, especially when one's put in a terrarium that wasn't his to start with, since there's all these different smells and scents. So we've seen a lot of different behaviors when we put them together. Sometimes they'll lick each other too, actually.
Awesome. So we're going to assume that this pair is going to be very successful.
Yes. We are hoping...
Instant connection.
Right.
So if your lizard dating app here is working, once they have babies, are you intending to put all of the babies back out into the wild?
It really depends on the number of babies that we have. Ideally, if for every release, we would want to release
Couple
at
number
least
3.
100 babies.
You have released 100 babies?
No, that would be the goal, to release at least 100 babies. So it really depends on how many we have and how they're genetically, each clutch is related to each other.
How many babies do they have at a time?
They can have anywhere between, lay between 15 and 30 eggs.
And is it 100% successful when they lay eggs? Do all those eggs hatch?
No, not always. A lot of times, if the eggs aren't fertile, they obviously won't hatch. A lot of times they're non-viable. They sometimes will develop even some growth on the outside, or they'll be dented or look a little out of the wrong shape. So it just depends.
Now, if you have a pair that is not successful, would you repair them with a different animal?
Yes. As long as they're not paired with one that they're related to.
Do horned lizards breed at specific times of the year, or can it be any time?
Ideally, it's in the spring months, but we've actually had one of the first clutches was born in October, which is pretty late in the season for a birth, so it really can vary.
Cassandra would like to know if the babies hatch ready for the world, or does mom have to stay with them for a while?
Yes, what's really awesome about these guys is that they don't require any neonatal care. There's no bottle feeding, there's no showing them what they need to do. Basically, as soon as they're hatched, they can start eating right away, and we'll give them fruit flies. We'll start with flightless fruit flies just because they're smaller and they're easier for them to catch, but pretty much after a couple of days of being hatched, they're already eating and hunting.
I think he's more into food than the lady.
Well, you gotta have a full stomach to
Now, once you have babies and you decide to release them into the wild, about how old do you do that?
Well, we're trying to find the best age for that. Ideally, we wouldn't want them to be so imprinted where they're used to being fed by people. So young enough where they're still kind of wary of people, but old enough where they can eat their common prey, which is ants. So it's kind of finding a good balance.
Where do we get our ants from?
We mail order our ants in from Utah.
Mail order ants. All right. Love that.
So yeah, thousands of ants every month delivered to our doorstep.
Have any of you been part of releasing these animals out into the environment?
I have.
You have. Can you tell us about that?
Well, it was an amazing experience. This is Leslie Nosselman again. We did, HLCS was invited to attend a release last year that Texas Parks and Wildlife did, and the Dallas Zoo and the Fort Worth Zoo. And we released them in 4 different areas. They had, there was around 100 little hatchlings, and they divided them up into 4 different kind of buckets, and then we just poured the little hatchlings out onto the ground, and some of them would instantly flatten as if there was a predator around. Some of them would puff up, so they instantly had that natural instinct for their defenses right off the bat. It was just a lot of fun. Baby horned lizards are just the cutest thing in the entire world.
So once they're released, is there any way to monitor them and their location, or are they just free to go?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. So at this release, about a quarter of the hatchlings were tagged. They put a little tag on it, and then they have a handheld device that they could go out there and find them. And so as long as that little tag is attached, they can still find those little horned lizards and see how many make it through the winter. That's a big thing. That's a big thing to monitor, is how many make it through the winter into the spring. If they can make it through the winter into the spring, then that's considered very successful for a release.
Awesome. Oh, couple number 4.
Oh, and if they want to see an actual video of the release that we did last year, we have it on our Facebook page.
Excellent. And what is the name of your Facebook page so everyone watching can go check it out?
Horned Lizard Conservation Society.
Horned Lizard Conservation Society. You hear that, guys? Everybody go like the page, follow them. Super cool.
Yeah, we've got stories and photos, sometimes videos.
So Cindy said she remembers horned lizards being all over in Texas. So what has caused them to be so rare now?
There's a lot of different components and answers to that question, and they're all right. Fire ants, invasive grasses, urban sprawl, pesticide use, people picking them up because they are so darn cute and keeping them as pets.
Which is illegal.
That's right.
Yes, it is. And I think the biggest reason is habitat loss. They used to, just not that long ago, they were all the way across to East Texas, and now it's really hard to see them east of I-35. So their habitat's declining quite fast.
Why fire ants? That's what Nancy would like to know.
Fire ants are an invasive species, and they will gladly take over any land that they can get their little ant feet into. So they'll displace the harvester ants, which are the main prey item of horned lizards, as well as subterranean termites. So they just kind of wreak havoc on the landscape. And for those of you that have had the experience of having involvement with fire ants, you know that's not a pleasant thing. And the lizards do not eat them like they do the other ones, and they can also suffer those nasty bites. They're not immune in any way to their venom or stings.
And they're devastating to hatchlings.
How big is a freshly hatched horned lizard?
A freshly hatched horned lizard is not even the size of a penny. Usually they weigh about 1 gram. These are some eggs from horned lizards that hatched out last year. So you can see they're slightly bigger than a Tic Tac, slightly smaller than a jelly bean.
They're like a white raisin.
Yeah, that's what they look like when they're dried up.
Awesome. Well, I'm wondering if live action is preventing action, and maybe they're all a little camera shy. These guys were not meant for the real life live love story. So I'm going to do a little pan of our awesome conservation team and everyone that is helping to save the horned lizard species. And Dr. Rob. Hello. So Becky, why don't you go ahead and let all of our viewers know what they can do to help not just horned lizards and the conservation of this species, but all of the animals here at the zoo.
We have an emergency fund set up right now during this crazy COVID situation that everyone is dealing with. If you can go on our website at www.sazoo.org, there's a direct link to that and our programs. There's donation buttons on there if you can help out. We would certainly appreciate it. Our animals certainly appreciate it. We hope to be open again as soon as we can so that we can have you guys all back to enjoy all of our wonderful animals here. And we certainly appreciate your time. joining us today and spreading the word and spreading the love. And go horn lizards.
Yeah, send good lovey-dovey vibes our way for 4 awesome couples.
Yep, he agrees. Bye, thank you.